Religion is preached for his blood, his courage, his generosity.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. السلام عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله الحسين. السلام عليك وعلى أهل بيتك وعلى أنصارك وعلى أخيك أبي الفضل العباس وعلى ولدك علي الأكبر وعلى أختك العقيلة زينب الكبرى. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Over a period of 10 days, we're going to share with you, my dear brothers and sisters, the story of Ashura and the significance of this universal event. Ashura took place on the 10th of Muharram, 10th of the month of Muharram, year 61 for the Hijrah, 61 years after the immigration of the Prophet, peace be upon him, from the city of Mecca to the city of Medina. And here we have to clarify a very important point to my dear brothers and sisters, and that is the Hijrah of the Prophet. His migration from Mecca to Medina did not take place on the 1st of Muharram. This is why, in fact, the Muslims should not celebrate the event of the Hijrah on the beginning of Muharram. According to all historians, all Muslim historians agree that the Hijrah of the Prophet took place in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal. However, during the reign of the second Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he was about to state and to establish the Muslim calendar based on the lunar calendar, he did not know where to start from, which month would be the first month. Here, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam, came to the aid of the second Caliph and suggested to him, as he suggested in many times and many events, that to start the Islamic year from the first month of Muharram, and to make Muharram as the first month, and to mark the Hijrah of the Prophet as the beginning of the Islamic calendar. Although the Hijrah of the Prophet took place in Rabi' al-Awwal, but the new year starts in the beginning of Muharram. So we have two different things here. We have the Hijrah, the actual Hijrah of the Prophet, which took place on the third month of the lunar calendar, which is the month of Rabi' al-Awwal. But the beginning of the lunar calendar begins with the Hijrah of the Prophet, and it starts from the month of Muharram. On the 10th of this month, the month of Muharram, the event of Ashura took place in the land of Karbala, on the banks of the Euphrates. Imam Housayn, the grandson of the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, traveled from his birthplace, the glorious city of Medina, going to Mecca al-Mukarramah. Then from Mecca, he traveled to the land of Iraq, was aiming to reach the city of Kufa, where many Muslims there in the city of Kufa invited him to lead the revolt and the uprising against the dynasty of the Umayyad, who ruled the Muslim countries and the Muslim populations since the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, 20 years earlier, on the year 40th of the Hijrah, after the assassination of Imam Ali alayhi salam in the city of Kufa. 6 months later, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan ascended to power. He grabbed the power. He appointed himself as the caliph to Prophet Muhammad, and he established the empire of the Umayyad dynasty. That date was October 10th. The day of Ashura was October 3rd. October 3rd, 680 AD. 680 AD. The day of Ashura marks as a day where Muslims stand for peace and justice. It's a day of renaissance for the Muslims. It's a day that Muslims worldwide, from the time of Imam Housayn and his revolution until today, and probably to the end of this life, to the time where Al-Mahdi alayhi salam is going to reappear, Muslims are going to celebrate and commemorate the event of Ashura, not as a memorial ceremony. Ashura is not an occasion for us to lament, to weep and cry. Ashura is an event, is an opportunity for us to revive ourselves, to revive our spirits, our minds, to reevaluate ourselves. Where do we stand vis-a-vis our leaders, the leadership in Islam? Who are the leaders who are ruling us? Are those leaders legitimate leaders? Are those leaders implementing justice, equality, respect for human life, for human rights, or not? Ashura is an opportunity for us. It's a turning point, actually, in the history of Islam, where Muslims reflect on what happened in the year 61, but relate that event to the contemporary times, to our times today, to get inspired and touched and moved by the movement of Imam Housayn alayhi salam on that day. To be able to stand up for justice, to claim their right, their dignity, to save their religion, to save their faith, to save their relationship with their Lord, to reinstate the passion for justice, for peace, for dignity, for the human rights, for the human dignity. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. If you take away dignity and respect, if you take away the honor from the Islamic faith, then Islam will be left without spirit. Then Islam is going to become a lifeless religion. Religion without substance. Religion without relevance. Religion without significance. In fact, the spirit of Islam is to be able to live in a dignified way, in a dignified manner. من كان يريد العزة فإن العزة لله ولرسوله وللمؤمنين. The day of Ashura represents the confrontation between two forces. On the one hand, the forces of ignorance, the forces of darkness, the forces of backwardness, the forces of mere whims and desires for worldly things, for worldly gains, against the forces of light, the forces of guidance, the forces of justice, of peace, of love, of mercy, of salvation. The day of Ashura represents the clash between two civilizations, two eternal civilizations that are not bounded by a geographic area, which is not bounded by time. The civilization of a truth and justice and human dignity versus the civilization of darkness, of violations of a human dignity, the civilization of terror, the civilization of disrespect for the human life, which was represented by Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, the son of Abu Sufyan, represented by at least 30,000 soldiers who marched the desert, who marched the plains to arrive into the land of Karbala, to arrest Imam Housayn, either to take him alive to Yazid ibn Muawiyah in Damascus, or to behead him and take his family members as captives and bring them before Yazid ibn Muawiyah. This occasion revives the Islamic spirit. We have to reflect on the message of Ashura. The message of Ashura is full of meaning. It's full of understanding. It's not a message of bigotry. It is not a message of hate. Muslims do not hate others. A good Muslim neither hates a Muslim or a non-Muslim. A good Muslim only hates Satan and the followers of Satan. إنما ذلكم الشيطان يخوف أولياءه. Satan has awliya. Satan has awliya, has friends and following. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran, Allahu waliyyu alladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min al-dhulumati ila al-nur. Allah is the wali, the leader, the guide, the inspiration for the good believers, for the righteous human beings, for the people of honesty, the people of integrity. He is their leader, he is their guide. يخرجهم, he takes them, he salvages them, min al-dhulumat, from the bottom of the darknesses, ila nur, to the light, to the middle of the light. On the other hand, the followers of arrogance, the followers of Satan and falsehood, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتِ. Those who do not submit to truth, those who do not accept reason, those are the concealers of faith, the concealers of the truth. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Allah regards them as those, describes them as those who conceal the truth. They don't submit to the truth. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتِ. Their leaders are not God anymore. Who is their leaders? الطاغوت, the powers of arrogance and destruction and aggression. أولياؤهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات. They take them back from the middle of the light to the bottom of the darkness. The journey of Ashura is a long journey, my friends. And our duty is to reflect, deeply reflect on what happened on that day. And also what camp we want to join and subscribe to. Do we want to be on this side or that side? On the side of darkness or the side of light? On the side of depression, backwardness, pessimism, or on the side of optimism and light and being hopeful? Which side? You can decide today. You are at a very important juncture here. Either you go on this side or that side. This is why the saying states, كل يوم عاشوراء وكل أرض كربلاء. Every day is a day of decision for you. Every day is a decisive day for you. A day where you decide whether I want to go to the right or to the left. I want to join this camp or the opposite camp. كل يوم عاشوراء. And every land, every geographic piece of land represents the land of Karbala. The land of where we had two types of people there. Some people who were willing to help, to sacrifice, to give their blood, to give their life, to give their family members, to give their children, to give them as sacrifice to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the altar of truth and justice. On the other hand, there were some people who sold their conscience, who sold themselves very cheap, in return for few dinars, few dirhams, very cheap price. They were purchased by Yazid ibn Muawiyah and the army of Bani Umayyah. They were hired mercenaries who were hired to assassinate the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, to assassinate his family members and his companions. 30,000 of them. And we find such examples in every time, at every age. Now, my friends, what do we do during the 10 days of Ashura? There are some recommendations. For those of you, especially who live in the West, who live in Canada, in America, in Europe, these are the first things that you must do and observe during the season of Ashura. Number one, we have to get prepared mentally, psychologically, and physically for Ashura. This is a season of change. This is a season of transformation. This is a season where we seek to be better people, to change our habits, to change our characters, to be true followers of the Lord, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his apostle, the Prophet, and his caliphs, Khulafa'ullah, and those are the family of the Prophet, Imam Housayn, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam is one of them, one of the caliphs, one of the vicegerents of Allah on earth. So we have to be prepared mentally and psychologically to receive these 10 days of Ashura and to receive the month of Muharram. One of the physical things that we have to do is to dress with the black, with dark color, as a sign that we are mourning the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as a sign of unity, a sign of harmony among the Muslim community, among the followers of the Prophet and his family, that there was a very tragic event that took place on that day, the day of Ashura, year 61, that shook the very foundations of the universe. It shook the earth. It shook the heaven. It made the angels shed their tears for the martyrdom of Imam Hussein in a very graphic way, him and his family members. One of the historians in the Sunni tradition states that we read the history of the Chinese, we read the history of the Africans, we read the history of the Romans, the history of the Persians, the history of the ancient Babylonians, we read the history of the ancient Egyptians, we read the history of all the civilizations, but we could not find a single incident where the grandson of the leader of that civilization, the grandson of the leader of that nation, ummah, community, was killed by some members, a righteous member of the family of the founder of that religion, which is here Imam Hussein alayhi salam, was murdered in a very savage and a brutal way by some members of that community. And then after that, after killing him, there were some horses who were asked with their riders to trample upon the bodies of that man and his children and his family members. He says, we cannot find any account of this incident in any history, in any place, in any civilization. The only people who did that were Bani Umayyah, or the followers of Yazid bin Muawiyah, and Ibn Ziyad, his military commander, and Umar ibn Sa'd, the military commander of the military excursion who went to fight Imam Hussein in Karbala. This is the only unique incident we find in the history of mankind. So we mourn this event. But beside mourning, also the day of Ashura represents the day of hope and revival for us. Hope for change, for transformation, to make our communities good, to make our communities the best, to follow the footsteps of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to be able to accomplish what he accomplished. Because the Taghut, the tyrant, wherever they are, in the east or the west, whether they wear Islamic dress or non-Islamic dress, the Taghut knows only one language, and this is the language of power. This is the language of unity. When people are united, when people are determined when people do not give up and do not lose hope in the victory of the Lord, at that time they can accomplish success and the ultimate salvation. And we will continue, inshallah, during these 10 days with the legacy of Imam Housayn alayhi salam. May Allah bless you all. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.